Have you been out to the forest much, Bruce, or is it not a good time for it?
Yeah, I go out there once or twice a week, wander around. I'm pretty familiar with it, and it needs some trails, but I can't put trails until winter or you know like early spring or sometime after the vegetation dies back. Yeah, uh, it's a very pretty piece of property, and it's very quiet. So it's gotten me uh, inspired about forest meditation and the whole tradition of forest meditation. And I've been doing a lot of research on forest too, so it's quite fascinating stuff.
Was it that whole Burmese forest tradition, or with,
Well, the Buddha starts out under a tree, you know, with his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and then they live in the forest in groves outside of towns. Um, for quite a while, they were pretty much living in the woods until oh, they really do, and they're always kind of, and at some point they start to have monasteries and cities, but that's much later. I think the transition to from forest to urban uh, was probably 1,000 years. So for a long time they were definitely kind of rural um, forest dwellers, and the forest tradition still lives in Korea and Japan a little bit, perhaps in China. Um, and in Tibet, they had a similar tradition. They didn't have, I mean, they had some forests in Tibet, but they, go right in the mountains. It's, basically going out in the wilderness. But mountains and forests are quite different, so you're going to get a different kind of experience, I think. I think I told you about, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, some Japanese person wrote a book called Forest Bathing. And he was encouraging people to spend an hour or two a day in the forest. It was definitely, it would improve your health and your mental clarity and all sorts of many good benefits. And he managed to get a whole book, which I haven't read, written on the subject. And I think the thing is, other than just being very peaceful and quiet, which is nice, it has very high oxygen levels in the forest, and you get kind of charged that way. And then it has other kinds of chemicals, the phenols, that it's exuding all over the place. And there's all these beneficial phenols. Essentially, you go out in the forest, you get all these nice, nice energies. It's funny because in a way, now in America doesn't have any tradition of forest meditation, although some of the centers are in kind of in woodsy areas, but they don't do much with the woods part of it. Even if you're at Carver Shoaling and Rocky Mountain Kamala Center never paid much attention to the idea that there were trees there. They just were sort of ornamental. American Buddhism is very much an urban meditation kind of thing. Of urban centers. There's Battle Creek, the other Battle Center's an urban center. We had, well, ours was rural because I lived in the country, but yeah, so I think there needs to be a shift to the forest, out of the cities to the forest. That's my new inspiration.
if there could never be just a true balance, like we went to like a Anita B. Gorman Discovery Center. I took Eli there, and it's a nice little nature area right in the middle, right on Troost. And then there's one off kind of east on Gregory, the Lakeside Nature Center, and that one's real real that's a real lot of trees, some great trails, and even some like cliff areas. But
Wow.
so it's not it's not like livable area. It's public and
They have a lot of good forests around Kansas City because of like Lake Jacomo. No, what's the lake where the buffalo are? Is that Lake Jacomo?
Yeah.
Yes. I'd had some big forests around it. And there's a really pretty park that has forest walks up by when you go on 70 east to St. Louis, up that toward that direction. Great Valley is that up there? Somewhere up in there, there's a really pretty park. Lots of forest. And then in Weston, you go up to Weston, right beyond there, there's a really pretty park, Weston State Park. It has beautiful forest trails along the bluffs of the Missouri River. Well, I'm going to start. Tonight, I want to continue with the monastic discipline. Because I found a very interesting treatise. It's the Buddha's Final Sermon, Shakyamuni Buddha's Final Sermon. And his final sermon is on the Pratimoksha for this particular text. Text is not at variance with some other texts about what the Buddha's final instructions were, but this text is called the Bequeathed Teaching Sutra. It was translated into Chinese around 400 current era and became an influential text often cited and commented on among Chinese Buddhists in the Tang, Song, and Ming dynasties. In Zen communities in particular, it was considered a basic reference taught and studied through the ages. So this 400 is pretty early in Chinese Buddhism, but it's 800 years after the Buddha. And it shows that the basic teachings of Vinaya as contained in the Pratimoksha recitation, which we read last time, were still being promoted. And this was going to summarize basically sort of like instructions to monks that the Buddha gives. And he's on his deathbed, and he's going to give these final instructions to monks. And it's a rather long text, so I'll read it, but it's listen closely, and there's many wonderful little parts in it. The Bequeathed Teaching Sutra. When Shakyamuni Buddha first turned the wheel of the Dharma, he delivered a number of people, and at the end of his teaching career, he explained the Dharma and saved many others. Having already delivered those whom he should deliver, the Buddha was reclining between the twin sala trees, about to enter nirvana. The time was the middle of the night, still and soundless. For the sake of his disciples, the Buddha gave a brief account of the essentials of the Dharma. The Buddha said, "You monks, after I am gone, you should honor and respect Pratimoksha, the discipline that liberates, as if you had found the light in the darkness, as if you were poor men finding a jewel. You must realize that this will be your great teacher. It will be no different than when I was in the world." Those who maintain pure discipline must not engage in commerce and trade. They must not own fields and houses or keep slaves or domestic animals. They must stay far away from all forms of wealth and property, as if avoiding a fiery pit. They must not cut down plants or till the soil. They must not engage in compounding medicines or doing prognostication or augury. They must not engage in gazing at the constellations or plotting the movements of the stars through the sky. They should regulate their bodies and eat only at the prescribed time, so that they lead a pure and independent life. They must not get involved in worldly affairs or serve in government posts. They should not use spells or magic or drugs. They should not curry favor with high-ranking people or be on intimate terms with the dissolute and vain. Those who maintain pure monastic discipline should seek salvation with a proper mentality and correct mindfulness. They should not hide their flaws or come out with divergent views that confuse the people. Toward the four offerings, they should show moderation and be satisfied. When they happen to receive offerings, they must not accumulate anything. This, then, is a brief account of the forms of maintaining discipline. So there you summarize the whole Praktimoksha in about 5 paragraphs. This, then, is a brief account of all the forms of maintaining discipline. Discipline is the basis of the liberation that comes from correct obedience to the Dharma. Thus it is called Praktimoksha, complete liberation. Based on this discipline, Shila, you can engender all forms of meditative concentration, samadhi, and the wisdom, prajna, that ends suffering. So there's the progression. Shila, samadhi, prajna, riding on Praktimoksha, the liberation from the it's part of the Vinaya. Therefore, you moksha maintain pure spotless discipline and not let yourselves break the precepts. If people are able to uphold pure discipline, then they will be capable of having good qualities. Without pure discipline, good qualities and virtue will not be born. Thus, you must realize that discipline is the principal secure abode of virtuous qualities. All you monks are already capable of abiding in discipline. You must control the 5 senses. Do not let them stray into the 5 desires. It is like a person herding an ox. Holding his staff, he watches over it and does not let it get away and trespass on other people's crops. If you indulge the 5 senses, the 5 desires will become boundless and uncontrollable. Like a bad horse which cannot be reined in, but instead pulls the person down into a pit. If you are robbed and injured, the pain is only for a lifetime. But if the 5 senses are rebellious, the disaster reaches into many lifetimes. The harm done is very serious. You must be careful. This is why the wise control the 5 senses and do not follow them. They hold them fast like potential rebels and do not let them loose. If people do indulge them, they always meet with destruction before long. That's not actually true. I know many older people who've indulged their senses all life in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, but it's a nice sentiment. You like to think that self-indulgence meets with a bad fate, but it doesn't really actually happen. Mine is yet, nevertheless, that freedom will only come through discipline. Mind is the ruler of these 5 senses. Therefore, you must be good at controlling the mind properly. There is more to be feared from the misuse of the mind than from poisonous snakes or wild beasts or vengeful rebels or great conflagrations or indulging in excess. No metaphor will suffice. Moving around back and forth, superficial and impulsive, it sees only the honey but not the deep pit. It is like a mad elephant without a mahout's hook to control it. It is like a monkey in a tree leaping and frolicking about, impossible to curb or control. You must be quick to take control of your mind and not let it run loose. Those who indulge this mind lose all the good things of humanity. Those who control it in one place can accomplish all tasks. Therefore, you monks should work scrupulously and make progress in taming and subduing the mind. When you monks consume food and drink, it should be like taking medicine. Do not take more of what you like or less of what you dislike. Take food and drink only to support your physical existence and ward off hunger and thirst. As bees gather from flowers, taking only the flavor but not harming the color or scent, so should monks be. When they receive offerings from people, they should accept them to remove affliction. They should not ask for a lot and damage their good state of mind. It is like an intelligent person who calculates how much strength of an ox will bear and does not exhaust it by overloading it. During the day, you monks should scrupulously cultivate good things and not let time slip away. Let there be no slacking off in the early evening or in the pre-dawn hours. In the middle of the night, recite sutras aloud to keep yourself alert. Do not let your whole life pass in vain without attainment on account of sleep. You should be mindful that the fire of impermanence burns through all worlds. Seek salvation soon. Do not sleep. The thieves of affliction are always waiting to slaughter people. They are worse than enemies. How can you stay asleep and not alert and arouse yourselves? The poisonous snakes of affliction are sleeping in your mind. It is like a black cobra sleeping in your room. You must use the hook of discipline to get rid of it right away. Only when the sleeping snake has been removed can you then rest secure. One who goes to sleep without removing the snake is a shameless person. Obedience to the sense of shame is number one among all adornments. Shame is like an iron hook that can control a person's transgressions against the Dharma. Therefore, you monks should feel shame at all times, without slacking off for a moment. If you lose your sense of shame, you have lost all the virtues. People with shame have good qualities. Those without shame are no different from animals. Sounding a bit curmudgeonly here. If someone comes along who is totally undisciplined, you monks must gather in your own minds and not let yourselves get angry. Guard your mouths and do not utter any maledictions. If you indulge in feelings of anger, you are blocking the way for yourself and losing the advantage of your virtues. Patience, Kasanti, is a virtue that upholding discipline and practicing austerities cannot match. So here patience is praised even above discipline, which is remarkable. It's a very pro-discipline text. Only those who are capable of practicing patience can be called great and powerful people. If you cannot gladly bear the poison of insults, as if you were sipping sweet dew, you cannot be called a person of wisdom who has entered the way. That's a nice little saying. If you cannot gladly bear the poison of insults as if you were sipping sweet dew, you cannot be called a person of wisdom who has entered the way. Why? The harm done by anger can destroy all good qualities and ruin a good reputation, so that no one in the present or the future will be happy to see you. You must realize that anger is worse than a raging fire. Guard against it always and do not let it enter. Of the thieves that carry off virtue, none is worse than anger. People in lay life are subject to desires, and not being people who practice the way, they have no way to control themselves, so their anger can still be forgiven. But those who have left home to practice the way, monks, and have no desires, to harbor anger is very wrong. It is like the flash of lightning from a pure, cool cloud that ignites a fire. It is not something that should be. You monks should remind yourselves, you have already abandoned all finery and put on shabby clothes. You carry alms bowls and beg for a living. Seeing yourselves like this, if you feel any pride, you must quickly do away with it. Even worldly conventional people do not think it proper to foster pride and arrogance. This is even more true for people who have left home to enter the way. For the sake of liberation, they subdue their minds and practice alms begging. Monks, a devious, flattering mentality is antithetical to the way. Therefore, you must make your minds honest and straightforward. You should realize that all deceit and flattery are just deceptions and lies. Such behavior is impossible for people who have entered the way. Therefore, all of you must adjust your minds with honesty and straightforwardness as the basis. You monks should realize that people with many desires seek much gratification, so that they also have many vexations. People with few desires are free from seeking and free from desire, so they do not have this trouble. That's really the heart of it right there. If the more desires you have, the more vexations you have, the less desires you have, the more freedom you have. And that's true whether you're a monk or a lay person. You must still cultivate practice to lessen your desires, which is true. What's more, lessening desire can engender the various virtues. People with few desires do not use flattery and deceit to seek other people's favor, nor are they dragged around by the senses. Those who practice the lessening of desires have minds that are calm and free from anxiety and fear. When they come in contact with things, there is more than enough. They are never unsatisfied. Where there is the lessening of desire, there is nirvana. This is called having few desires. You monks who want to escape from all the various afflictions must contemplate what it means to know satisfaction. The method of knowing satisfaction is the locus of prosperity, of bliss, of peace, and security. Even if they are lying on the ground, the people who know satisfaction are happy and at peace. For the people who do not know satisfaction, it does not suit their fancy even if they are in heaven. The people who do not know satisfaction are poor even if they are rich. The people who do not know the people who do know satisfaction are rich even if they are poor. Those who do not know satisfaction are forever dragged around by the five desires and pitied by those who do know satisfaction. This is called knowing satisfaction. If you seek the peaceful and still, secure bliss of non-action, you monks must distance yourself from the hustle and bustle and dwell at ease wherever you are. People who dwell in peace are honored by Indra and all the devas. Thus you must abandon your own group and all other groups and live alone in peace, contemplating the annihilation of the root of suffering. If you take joy in groups, you are subject to the afflictions of those groups. It is like a great tree. If too many birds gather in it, there is a danger that the tree will weaken and break. I can't imagine that happening. But worldly bonds and attachments sink you down into the multitude of sufferings. It is like an old elephant sinking into the mud, which cannot get itself out. So to abandon that is detachment. Nothing will be difficult for you monks if you work hard and make energetic progress. Therefore, you must work hard and make energetic progress. It is like a small stream flowing against the rock all the time, so that eventually you can bore through that rock. If the practitioner's mind often slacks off, it is like drilling for fire but stopping before it gets hot. If you want to get fire, it is impossible. Thus, continue practicing. That's called energetic practice. You monks should seek out enlightened teachers and good protectors and aids. And do not forget to be mindful of the Dharma. If you do not forget this mindfulness, then the thieves of affliction cannot enter. Therefore, you must always gather in your attention on the mind. If you lose mindfulness, then you lose all virtues. If the power of your mindfulness is strong, even if you enter among the thieves of the five desires, you will not be harmed by them. A little tantric line in there. If the power of your mindfulness is strong, even if you enter among the thieves of the five desires, you will not be harmed by them. It is like wearing armor into battle. You have no fear. This is called not forgetting mindfulness. If you monks collect the mind, your mind is in meditative concentration, samadhi. Because your mind is in meditative concentration, you know all the characteristics of the worldly phenomena of birth and annihilation. Therefore, all of you must always diligently cultivate and assemble all the various states of meditative concentration. If you attain meditative concentration, then your mind is not in confusion. It is like a family concerned with water control that takes good care of the dams. Practitioners are also like this. For the sake of the water of wisdom, they constantly cultivate meditative concentration and do not let the water of wisdom leak away. This is called meditative concentration. If you monks have wisdom, then you have no craving or attachment. You are constantly self-aware and do not allow any mistakes. If so, then you can achieve liberation by my teaching. If not, then you are not a person of the way, nor are you a lay person. There is no name for you. Real wisdom is the solid and secure ship for crossing the sea of old age, sickness, and death. It is also the great bright lamp amid the darkness of ignorance, the good medicine for all diseases, the sharp axe that cuts down the trees of affliction. Therefore, all of you should always use hearing the Dharma, contemplating the Dharma, cultivating the Dharma, and the wisdom of Dharma to increase the benefit. If people have the perception of wisdom, even without the eye of the gods, they are clear-eyed people. This is wisdom. If you monks engage in all kinds of sophistry and trivial arguments, your minds will become confused. Even though you have left home, you still will not be liberated. Therefore, monks should quickly abandon the trivial arguments of confused minds. If you want to attain the bliss of nirvana, you must know well how to put an end to this problem of sophistry and trivial argument. This is called not engaging in trivial argument. In regard to all the virtues, you must always abandon all indulgence, as you would shun a robber full of hate. The benefits propounded of the Buddha of great compassionate, world-honored one, are all in terms of the ultimate truth. You simply must work hard and practice what the Buddha has taught. Wherever you are, whether in the mountains or valleys or dwelling at ease in a quiet place under the trees, here are my trees again, be mindful of the Dharma you have received and do not let yourself forget it or lose it. You must always exert yourself to make energetic progress cultivating it. Do not bring upon yourselves the worries and regrets of dying in vain. I am like a good doctor who diagnoses a disease and prescribes a medicine. It is not the doctor's fault if the patient does not take the medicine and thus is not cured. I am also like a good guide who gives people good directions. If the people hear but do not follow them, it is not the guide's fault. If you have any doubts about the Four Noble Truths, you should ask me about them quickly. Do not harbor doubts without seeking to get them resolved. Then the world-honored one called on the monks 3 times, like this, to voice their doubts, but no one asked questions. Why? Because those in the assembly had no doubts. At this time, Anirudra observed the minds of those assembled there and said to the Buddha, World-honored one, the moon could become hot and the sun could become cold, but the Four Noble Truths could never be any different. You have taught the truth of suffering, and it really is suffering. It cannot be made into happiness. The accumulation of ignorance and craving is really the causal basis of suffering, and there is no other causal basis. For suffering to be extinguished, the causal basis is extinguished. The cause is ended, so the result is ended. And the path for the ending of suffering is the true path. There is no other path. O world-honored one, all these monks are certain of the Four Noble Truths and have no doubts about them. In this assembly, those who have not yet accomplished the work will have feelings of sadness when they see the Buddha die. Those who have newly entered into the Dharma hear what the Buddha says, and all will find deliverance. But for them, it is like seeing a flash of lightning in the night, so that they may see the path. Those who have already accomplished the work and crossed over the ocean of suffering will think, alas, how quick was the world-honored one's parinirvana. So Anirudra spoke like this, and all in the assembly did completely understand and comprehend the meaning of the Four Noble Truths. The world-honored one wanted to enable the whole congregation to find strength and solidity. So with a mind of great compassion, he again explained for them. You monks should not harbor worries and vexations within yourself. Even if I were to stay in the world for an entire eon, our time together would still have to end. Being together without parting will always be unattainable. For benefiting self and others, the Dharma is fully equipped and sufficient. If I stayed longer, there would be no further gain. Those whom I can and should deliver within the realm of gods and human beings have all been delivered. Those who have not yet found deliverance have all already formed the causal conditions for finding deliverance. If after this my disciples continue to carry on the teaching, then this will be the Tathagata's Dharmakaya, his Dharma body, being present forever without end. Thus you must realize that all worldly things are impermanent. Every meeting must have a party. Do not be anxious about this. This is a characteristic of worldly things. You should work hard, make energetic progress, and seek liberation as soon as possible. Use the light of wisdom to put an end to the darkness of all forms of ignorance. The world really is perilous and fragile and insecure. Today, I am dying. It is like getting rid of a noxious disease. This is an evil thing we must abandon, temporarily called the body, sunk in the great ocean of birth, old age, sickness, and death. What person with wisdom would not be glad to get rid of it, this deadly robber? You monks must constantly, single-mindedly, earnestly seek a way out. Everything in the world, moving or static, is marked by decay and insecurity. Is marked by decay and insecurity. So stop for now. Let's have no more talk. Now I'm about to go. I'm about to die to enter parinirvana. This is the last lesson I will teach. So I thought that was quite a cool text. A little extreme in spots, but quite good. You really get a sense of the enthusiasm and the ardor and the passion that these monks have. I mean, these people are living the most minimal, austere, focused lives. All the following all this discipline. Engaged in the meditation, engaged in the mindfulness practice, engaged in their daily activity. I mean, it's very inspiring in its way that people would aspire to this level of intensity in their commitment to the Dharma and to liberation. And for those of us who lead the less intense worldly life of lay people, there are still many fine pointers in here, particularly about working with your mind and working with desire and essentially learning to focus and not accumulate unnecessary hardships for ourselves.
Do you think some of those more extreme or intense passages are a translation issue? Like I was stuck on the word shame, and shame has like certain connotations, or it just sticks out like a sore thumb in some ways. Shame doesn't.
Well, it's one of the it's considered one of the good virtues. If you look at like when we get to Abhidharma, we'll talk about the 100 elements of existence, and those a lot of those are virtues and vices of different kinds. And on the virtue side is shame. Um, Now, this is again a cultural thing. In the time period that these texts are being written, um, they obviously that's a strong way to keep people in line. That people are embarrassed to break these rules, embarrassed to act badly. I mean, I know it seems it's like in this age of the Trumpian age, it's really hard to imagine somebody being embarrassed about their behavior. And, like what? And particularly very minor things. Like a lot of this stuff. I mean, we're not talking about like, billionaire level vice. We're talking about just tiny little vices, and feeling shame about that. But that's the difference between an enlightened person and an idiot. The idiot feels no shame. The idiot just doubles down on being stupid, That's what makes him an idiot. But the monk is this is about wisdom and discipline and virtue and liberation and freedom. And it's not about being, lots of examples of how to be an idiot, but very few examples about how to be virtuous.
Is it like
Being is important, it's just this is just a bad, eon for in modern times are not real good that way. But
is it like self-awareness and then embarrassment of the ways that you're aware that you came off strong? I mean, is that what is shame, I guess, in this context? And it's like shame, I think, is like you're gonna be ostracized or some. There's like an implicit threat in shame that I understand. Whereas in shame, like sometimes compared with guilt, guilt is more like just a recognition that you did something, you said something off, or whatever.
But guilt is never a virtue. Guilt is not. Guilt's always considered problematic because guilt is a kind of dwelling on a mistake that you made. So guilt is considered a non-productive emotion. Shame, on the other hand, it is really it's more like what we call fear of God. It's basically you're in a store, you could steal something, but none of us actually do shoplift in stores, right? And it's not because we couldn't get away with it. I mean, you could get away with all kinds of stuff. It's just that if we got caught, or even if we didn't get caught, we just feel shabby and embarrassed.
Okay.
So any kind of situation that makes you feel shabby about yourself, where you've been you see some kid with an ice cream cone and you steal his ice cream cone. You hit yourself. I mean, you're gonna feel kind of ashamed.
So it's like you're stepping down ethically, and you're totally aware that you're stepping down ethically.
Yeah. In fact, you don't step down because you have a sense of shame. You would never do such a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if people gave you, say, I'll give you $1,000 to go punch that baby in the face. You're not going to do that. And even if you need $1,000, you have some pride. Some not pride so much as so no amount of money can induce you to bad behavior. You would just be ashamed of yourself.
Okay.
So it's sort of related to modesty also. I mean, monks are considered to have to be very, very modest. Remember, they had a whole page of not even anything slightly seeming to be unchaste in any manner, or unvirtuous, or engaging in any of the non-virtues like slander, and lying, and all that. So again, this part of this idea of a exemplar of virtue is that you have to be very modest and unassuming, and also you're trying to be this model of serenity. So, actually, he just, although he talks about how important the Praktimoksha is and how important the discipline is, this was a 9-page text. He was done with the discipline, that kind of, hard discipline in about a page. And then the rest of it is telling you how to work with your mind, how to work with your thoughts, how the, importance of meditation, the importance of effort, good qualities. So it's not that the whole path opens up through the gateway of discipline. The part that always seems a little cold to me is where he, at the, getting on there, he's giving all this wonderful advice, and he says, "Well, I'm a physician. I'm just handing out the medicine. If you don't take it, then tough luck to you. And I'm the guy. I'm giving you the map, and if you don't use it, then it's not my fault." And that, in a way, that's definitely true. I mean, in Buddhism, everybody has to actually. It's definitely particularly in the early Buddhism, path of individual responsibility. But nowadays, that can sort of seem a little bit, from the Mahayana perspective, that seems a little, could be a little, there could be a little more kindness.
Yeah. I thought that too when that part came up. Also, like, it seems like maybe Western psychology, modern, has something to offer there, and that people are just stuck in these habits, and they're actually, some things are slightly outside of the realm of free will, in a sense, and they've got to work XYZ out before they can take the medicine or follow the map or something.
Well, yeah, in this view, it's sort of a step-by-step process. So, he's going to talk to people about discipline, about acting virtuously, and so forth. And if you're still struggling with, being virtuous, if that's hard for you to do that, then it keeps you back from any of the higher attainments, meditative attainments, because non-virtue just kind of shreds any kind of momentum or progress you might be making in terms of meditative stability and deeper wisdom, insight. Particularly anger, that's a classic one. And you see it here, this is very early. I mean, the Tibetans are always big on this, and you'll see it in all the Tibetan Lamrim, a moment of anger will waste 20 years of good work. And yet, everybody's getting angry all the time, too. So a lot of it...
Well, one of the lines was that you should not hide your flaws. So, I mean, can you say more about that?
That seemed to be Trungpa Rinpoche's motto. He must have read that somewhere. Most people hide their flaws. Most teachers hide their flaws. In fact, this has been a major problem, really, is that they hide their flaws, and then people find out and think, "Oh my God, you're such a rascal." And, and they're all like, "Oh, well, I don't know what to do." And at least Trump would never help. He didn't hide his flaw. Everything was right out there. Everybody knew exactly. He's very unusual that way. Now, whether or not hiding your flaws, I mean, some of his flaws are really serious. I mean, So, but that, as far as not hiding him, he was definitely good about that.
Well, maybe think of those formal events where the monks like confess or whatever. I mean,
that too.
It had, I thought it touched a little bit on that, and then
Definitely.
I just wondered, it just sounded funny that maybe you should, because some things are considered artistic flaws or something, but so yeah.
No, I don't think we're talking about wabi-sabi flaw here. Maybe when you're very old and you have little, cute little senile habits, but I never hear. No one ever looks at him that way. To be honest, you start acting senile, and even the other old people start dissing you. That's not a good thing.
Well, it's like you hear about the George Bush. It was H that is when the Me Too movement sort of first started up. He was talked about as like touching women when they're getting their photographs taken or something. He's like actually touching their behinds or something. And it was like a known thing. They're like, oh yeah, that's what he does, or something like that. So it's funny. The old man flaw type of thing you were talking about.
Joe Biden sniffing hair of women or something like that. But these guys are. That's funny because these guys are. And Joe Biden is a little older than I am, but I mean, anybody knows that you can't do that. I mean, it wasn't like these guys go, oh, back in the day, back when I was in high school, like Brett Kavanaugh. Oh yeah, back when I was in high school, what we did in high school, we all did a lot of stuff in high school. And I go, no, we didn't all do a lot of stuff. We all were creeps in high school and predators. And you might have been, but we weren't. I mean, most people weren't. Yeah, people excuse a lot of bad behavior that way. That's one of the reasons I've harped on the discipline quite a bit. Is that when I read all this, the care that the Buddha placed and the importance that the Buddha placed on moral discipline, even to this very, very austere standard. It's almost like zero tolerance standard. It just makes me, feel very strongly that, the importance of moral discipline as a basis for the path. If having been part of the Buddhist scene in America for almost 50 years, I think maybe over 50 years, the big flaw, people did not have good discipline. People did not have good moral discipline. Teachers did not have good moral discipline. Students did not have good moral discipline. I mean, all the problems that the Sangha has had in the last 50 years in this country have been problems. It wasn't due to problems in that people weren't smart enough, or the Dharma intellectual enough, or they didn't get the philosophy right, or they didn't practice enough. I mean, people have, we do great with philosophy and practice, but the moral discipline of American and their foreign teachers and a lot of the students is still terrible. And they didn't take it seriously. And I think all kinds of problems came up as a result of that. So particularly, I mean, this is an older group and we're all well behaved, particularly when I talk to the young people, the 20-year-old in Battle Creek, which I'll tomorrow. I can't stress that point enough. That the tolerance for bad behavior in Buddhism is zero. I mean, It has to be. Otherwise, you're just going to have problems. You're going to hurt. You're going to bring discredit to the Dharma. Why are you doing this? It would cause us no benefit. So it's real important to just for people to appreciate this.
That's always why it's a shock when we hear about something like that. The kamikaze pilots, were trained by Zen, masters or something, and then things like what the Myanmar Buddhist people did to like the Rohingya, this kind of thing. Those are shouldn't being real shocking, because normally you figure it's just the Buddhists are totally passive or just non-violent.
Well, and also in the monasteries of Tibet and China, there was tremendous amount of abuse. Beatings and all kinds of sexual abuse, and just like any monasteries. Which is another thing, institutionalized Dharma always is going to start to have. It's very hard to keep your discipline once you get some wealth. You get some, there's the early Buddhists, that's why they don't deal with property and money and ownership, and they keep it very light that way. So back to the forest. This is get out of the decaying urban centers of dissolute discipline. Get back to the pure virtue of oxygenated greenery.
But if the power of your mindfulness is strong, and you have the secure abode of virtuous qualities, then you should be able to. You're safe among. What was the line? Safe among the afflictive experiences, or something.
Yeah, so we get to that later with Tantra. Yeah, I mean, even in Mahayana, it changes, because essentially, if your heart is pure, then you're going to keep good discipline. When you think again, the problems that people had, it wasn't because there was an excess of pure heart in the Sangha. It was a lack of compassion that people exploited each other in one way or another. And it's always a lack of compassion that causes personal problems. Somebody trying to use somebody in some way. We're not respecting somebody in some way. And that doesn't happen if people have a pure heart, and an altruistic heart. So the Mahayana, simplifies the whole process by focusing on the heart. And then in Tantra, you've got this sort of always have the sense of sacred world. So that generally works as that's how you're able to, everything is pure in Tantra. So yeah, you're surrounded by, drugs, booze, and whores, and dandymen or whatever, that you're fine, because you have a pure view of the whole thing. So there's no problem.
Opa.
So was that a text that is part of the Theravadan Pali Canon, or is it a friend?
No, this is from a book which you might be able to buy on Amazon. It's part of this BTK series. Mm-hmm. It's called Apocryphal Scripture. Uh-huh. And I think this one is apocryphal in the sense that, it's unlikely that these were Shakyamuni Buddha's final words, but it's somebody imagining Shakyamuni Buddha giving this great final Dharma talk right?
Hmm.
And it's not necessarily. It said he translated it in 400, so I'm not sure it said what language he translated it from, and it's not clear why this one's called apocryphal. The other ones, they're talking about things that were written in China, and they were pretending they came from India. So I don't know if this one was written in China as kind of a summary of the Buddhist path, which is an excellent short summary. It covers all the points, really. Or whether it was an Indian text. I suspect they're thinking it's apocryphal because either the Chinese or some of the Central Asian kingdoms like Khotan that also were Buddhist and that people wrote texts and stuff. It might have come from one of those places and not been originally part of any canon. It's a little it's a little too punchy. The style of it is more like a much later piece than the Buddha would have, but it wasn't quite that punchy in his.
Right.
For me, like the early sutras, the style is very different. The kind of style is kind of very, slow and repetitive. But it's a gem. That's a real gem of a text. I think it covered so many beautiful points.
I really like the end when he's you can feel how, I mean, you can just kind of see him laying in the trees and all the disciples around and saying, "Don't die," and "We're gonna miss you," and all that. It's just such a, and he's saying, "It doesn't matter. I've done what I can do." And people who have been liberated are, and people who will be liberated, and you guys will carry it. I like that part. It's nice.
And wherever you have discipline, you have me. Wherever you have mindfulness, you have me. Wherever you have awareness, you have me. It's very interesting because he really does tell I'm with you forever. As he's not as in as Shakyamuni Buddha, but as the Dharmakaya itself. Mm-hmm. So, regaining our Savior, he reunites with the ground and stays present forever and ever.
When does that term Dharmakaya show up? Does that kind of give an indication of its time of origin? Is that a part of the early Pali Canon?
Well, obviously this is 400 AD. This is a post Yogacara written text, or at least terminology. The Dharmakaya wouldn't have been a term that had been used until you get to Mahayana Buddhism.
Okay.
It was the Kaya theory. I mean, it probably was starting to be developed before Yogacara, but it's generally the Yogacharans gave it its formulation that's continued at the present. Well, any last questions? The second and the third time, any? The rest continue. Understood. Good understanding. That was 9 pages. And again, I think you should take a look. Apocryphal Scriptures is the name of the text. This might have been one of the ones that I picked up cheaply. They had a bunch of them on sale on Amazon. So it's got some other interesting stuff in it too. There's 4 or 5 different texts in that particular volume. Well, we're at that magic hour where we will dedicate merit and heart company as predicted by the text. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings.
Thank you, Bruce.
So next week, I have a surprise. We're going to leave the monks behind that we've been talking about for a few weeks, and we're going to talk about nuns.
No.
So we're going to talk about women, the earliest women in Buddhism, and we're going to enter a whole different world. I get to leave the monks to their macho discipline, and we'll learn about nuns and their experience. We'll do that for a few weeks. So we'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Night,
Thank you.
everyone.